Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite 3rd edition 3.5 D&D books. A book which I don't think a lot of people are really aware of or sure of what it is. But today I want to talk about Magic of Incarnum. I think I've mentioned this book in a few other videos, but I don't know if I ever really went into any sort of detail as to what it really was. This is going to be like a comprehensive, like, deep dive into the book or anything. I'm going to flip through it and we're going to focus on a couple things, read maybe a couple of examples of things as we go, but it's not going to be like a super deep dive or review necessarily of Magic of Incarnum. It's more or less just kind of putting out there what this book actually was. Magic of Incarnum was one of the, what we used to call at my local game store, the alternate system books that were coming out in like mid to late 2005, going into like 2006. It was a period of time in which D&D 4th edition was definitely something that internally people at Wizards of the Coast were preparing to work on. And a lot of us, like I said, at my local game store, kind of suspected that a lot of these alternate system books, like Magic of Incarnum, the Tome of Magic, which had 3 different systems in it, like True Name Magic, Shadow Magic, and there was one where you could sort of like interact with these aspects of sort of almost like forgotten creatures. It was a weird one. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I will do a video on it at some point though, because it was definitely interesting. But yeah, that book wasn't. I don't regard that book as highly as I do this one. But you also had things like Weapons of Legacy, the Tome of Battle, Book of Nine Swords, which introduced fighter stances, which were kind of like a fighter's version of spellcasting, sort of. Kind of a similar idea, I guess you could say, and it certainly would go on to influence the way that martial classes like fighters, were sort of designed in D&D 4th edition when that came out. And then you also had like Dragon Magic, which is a book that honestly I still don't know much about, even though I've owned it ever since it came out. I don't think I've ever really looked through it all that much. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about Magic of Incarnum. And what Magic of Incarnum is, it's a concept where, like, the idea I think behind it is, what if you created a mechanic and class structure, feats, skills, spells, what have you, that could revolve around player characters being able to manifest and improve and expand their own like magic items without having to rely on just finding items for treasure. It sounds kind of, it's kind of hard to describe on the surface, I guess. So we're going to dive into it here, into the book a little bit, just in a moment. But that's kind of the core concept: is you have this energy that you can manifest, that you can harness, and you can shape it into things that occupy the same slots on a character's body as magic items, but they're not like actual magic items. They're tied to the character's ability to sort of shape this resource. And the resource is the titular Incarnum. So there are a few key words that we need to know when it comes to this system. The first one would be Incarnum itself, which the book lists as an amorphous magical substance made up of the soul energies of all sentient creatures, living, dead, and it is theorized those even not yet born. It's kind of it's a cool concept, and when it says soul energy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are literally siphoning the energy from a creature's soul and using it like that directly. It's kind of almost like using, to borrow like Star Wars terms, it's almost like the Force. It's something that's just, it permeates everything. It surrounds you. It's just part of the natural. It just permeates the universe, and it's not like necessarily something that you pull from an individual. Although there is an option to do that, which we will kind of get into. But it's just sort of like, again, this sort of nebulous concept, right? So you can use Incarnum and you can shape it into what's referred to as soul melds. And a soul meld, as it says here, is a semi-permanent magical effect crafted from raw Incarnum. Soul melds are worn much like magic items once shaped. A soul meld lasts as long as the creator wants it to. So you take this Incarnum, this like magical energy that just exists in the world, and you can harness it and shape it into these soul melds. The melds occupy the same slots on a character's body as magic items, and they use the term chakras for this in this system. It's not quite the same as like what we think of or what some people, because I don't actually understand chakras myself, but for people that are aware, it uses the term, but it's not quite the same thing. I think they use like some of the same terminology. So instead of it being like the head slot, like you would have for helms or headbands or stuff like that for magic items, I think they call it like the crown slot. Instead of it being like your body, it's your soul. I think that they have, and there's like shoulders and stuff like that. So they use like the term chakra, but essentially it's the same as the body slots that magic items can occupy. So hands, arms, shoulders, neck, head, and then body and feet sort of thing. So that's like the soul melds. And with the chakras, as you increase in level, if you're playing the classes that are designed around the Incarnum mechanic, if you progress enough in levels, instead of having these kind of like semi-permanent soul melds that sort of like look like this translucent image that just sort of hovers over the body slot. As you progress in level, you can actually bind the soul meld to one of those specific body slots. The slot that you can connect it to or to bind it to directly changes as you go up in level. So you start off, I think one of them is like the head one that you can unlock first, and one of the last ones that you unlock is the soul chakra. But when you do that, it actually becomes like a physical, tangible thing that actually occupies that body slot, meaning that you can't use both a magic item and the chakra bind at the same time. There, of course, is 3.5, so there's exceptions to every rule, which I'll talk about a little bit. But yeah, so you have soul melds, which occupy body slots, but don't limit you to just the bind or a magic item. You can benefit from both, and they're kind of like the least powerful version of like the abilities. The binds usually give you a more powerful ability or extra abilities that you can use, but to actually sort of increase and scale the different item or the different melds that you can create, you have what's called Essentia. And Essentia is a character's personal storage of Incarnum. So it's basically them utilizing their own personal soul energy and using it to power or to increase the relative power of the soul melds. And again, it'll make more sense as I sort of show like actual abilities, but that's basically what you need to know. Incarnum is just the soul energy that just permeates the multiverse. Characters that like the Incarnate or some of the ones that we have in here, they can actually shape that raw energy into soul melds. And soul melds are kind of this like translucent spectral item that sort of hovers over the slot of the body that you can bind it to as you gain enough power to do so. And then to sort of increase the benefits of the soul meld, you have your own essential pool of points that you can sort of put into it. The easiest way to sort of describe would be like the Scion's power points and using them to upgrade your abilities. That's kind of what Essentia is. So let's actually take a look. There are some like races here. I'm not going to really talk too much about the races in this particular video, but essentially they all have their own like essential pool. So even if you don't take a class that uses Incarnum, they would still have a point that they can use. And some of them will even have like racial abilities that they can spend that point on. Okay, so here we go. So we got I think it's two classes that they really talk about here. We have the Incarnate, which is the first one here. And so you can see with the Incarnate, they have their Essentia pool. So they start with 1 point of Essentia, plus any points they might have for the race or their feats that you can take that can increase that number as well. But they go up to 26 at 20th level. Now, the amount of Essentia that you can actually assign to any of the soul melds that you have manifested is dependent on your levels. So levels 1 through 5, you can only put a single point into the soul meld. At 6th through 11th, you can put 2 points into it. 12th to 17th, you can spend 3 points on any of your melds, and 18th to 20th, you can put 4 points into one of your soul melds. And like I said, we'll take a closer look at those sort of as we go. The Incarnate it's kind of like the wizard or cleric version of like a class that utilizes the mechanic introduced in this book. So they have like weapon and armor proficiencies, though it's not like as good as like a fighter might have, or even one of the other classes that comes after it. But they do have the larger pool of Essentia. They gain the ability to bind to all of the slots instead of just a few of them. They can also manifest more soul melds at once, and they can bind or have more chakra binds available to them than some of the other classes. And also an interesting aspect of the Incarnate here is that they're alignment restricted. And it's something that doesn't really exist in modern D&D, but back in the day, there were classes that actually had alignment restrictions, like a paladin had to be lawful good. And I think in 3rd edition, rangers had to be good, or there was maybe a 2nd edition where rangers had to be good. But like druids had to have like a neutral alignment to them, monks had to have a lawful alignment to them. Rogues couldn't be lawful. Like there was actually like alignment restrictions in 3rd edition D&D for quite a few of the classes. What's interesting about the Incarnate is they have to have one of the 4 like alignment axes as an extreme. So they have to be either lawful or chaotic, or good or evil, and whichever one that they choose, the other axis of alignment, that has to be neutral. So they only focus on one specific aspect of morality, be it good or evil, or law or chaos. So you can be lawful, neutral, neutral evil, chaotic neutral, or neutral good. Like those are the only alignments that you could have. And there are actually your soul melds, several of them actually do different things based on your alignment. So that's kind of why they have that. So they're hyper focused on one aspect of alignment. The other one has to be neutral. Yeah, so basically, I'm not going to go through everything that the class has here I'm not going to go through everything that the classes get, but like I said, you just sort of unlock different chakras that you can bind your soul melds to as you go up in level. So you start with like crown, which is the head slot. Then you can, 4th level, you can bind things to your feet or hands. Eventually you can bind to your arms, brow, or shoulders. Then you've got like throat or waist, heart, and then finally your soul chakra that you can bind things to. Again, you get more points, you get more melds that you can create, and you have more things that you can have bound to a chakra, all at a given time. Then we have the soulborn. The soulborn is kind of like the fighter of the like Incarnate classes. So they have like the fighter's base attack, the warrior's base attacks, saving throws, but they also have way less that they can do in terms of Essentia pool, soul melds, and chakra binds. So they're sort of like more focused on like the martial aspect of D&D, but they have minor access to some of these other features. In fact, I would actually say that the Soulborn is more like the Paladin because they have like smite opposition. So they also have like the alignment restriction, but they can smite anyone that has an alignment that's opposite of the one that they're focused on. So for example, if you were... Oh, okay, so these ones, they're polarized in their alignments, so they can't have neutral. So they can be lawful good, lawful evil, or chaotic evil. Okay, so like they can be lawful good and they could smite a chaotic evil character, or they could be a lawful evil and smite a chaotic good, or, sort of vice versa. So again, they kind of play with the alignments in the system, which I thought was really, really cool. Then there was the Totemist, which I kind of think was more or less like the Druid version of it. So they were kind of, they used it as more like a spiritual, animalistic thing. This is actually a class that I never really looked at, to be honest, so I really don't know much about it. If I do like a proper review of this book, or if I do like a deeper dive, I'll definitely look into that class. But the Incarnate was the one that I was the most drawn to when I was looking into this game, or into this book. All right, so you also have like skills and feats. Yeah, so basically, I think the only thing that they really do, actually, do they even add new skills? I thought they might have had like knowledge Incarnum, but I don't think that's in here. I think that's actually grouped with either like the planes or Arcana. But they actually had quite a few feats. And again, with feats, with 3rd edition 3.5, feats was a huge aspect of the game. I'm not going to go into too many of them here, but there was some cool stuff. Like, for example, you had like double chakra, so you could actually have you can have 2 soul melds can occupy the same chakra instead of just one. So you could actually kind of stack them. They're not binds, they're just the melds, but you could actually sort of double dip there a little bit. Then there was split chakra, which is one that I definitely took advantage of, where you can actually have a magic item and a soul meld share the same chakra, so the same basic body slot on a character. When you took split chakra, you did have to specify the specific. That's those are words. You had to specify which chakra it was. So you couldn't just say split chakra and then choose any one at any time. It's you took the feat and say you would take like split chakra hands or split chakra heart or split chakra soul. So that's sort of how that worked. And again, there's like different feats. Again, some that increase your pool or of Essentia. There were feats that would allow you to spend Essentia to boost certain like saving throws or skill checks or stuff like that. They had, I think, one that you could spend Essentia to increase like smite damage and stuff like that as well. So there's just a lot of, like I said, interesting stuff that this had. I'm not going to dive too deep into it. The main one that I always focused on was the split, was like the split chakra. So that I could have a magic item and a chakra bind at the same time, at the same body slot. You also had several like racial substitution levels for the different classes in this book. Racial substitutions were not introduced in this book, but the concept was that certain races may have different affinities for a particular class over others. So at various levels, like for example with the elf soulborn at 1st, 2nd, or 7th level, instead of gaining whatever the normal class abilities were for the, like in this case would be the soulborn, instead of having like whatever they would get normally for the default version of the class, you could take this alternate feature instead. But once you chose one of these things, or once you reached the level where you could choose to take the alternate feature or not, if you didn't, you couldn't go back and change your choice. So if you decided not to take the 2nd level feature, but then took the 7th level feature, you couldn't go back retroactively and change the fact that you didn't take the 2nd level one. At least that's how I remember it. I don't think you were locked into all 3 levels. I think you could choose which ones, but once you passed that level, there was no going back. And then we get into soul meld. So this is, again, my favorite section of this book. There's a couple of soul melds in particular that I kind of want to focus on because they were ones that I really liked, and I can try to make sense of this system. Here's actually an example of what a soul bind or soul meld would look like. So again, you see this sort of like shimmering force surrounding the character, but it's not actually physically touching him. It's almost like it's not really a force field, but it's almost like this barrier that kind of like surrounds whatever the slot was that they were using. So again, it's just sort of that's a really good representation of it. There's also a really good visual representation here that I just want to get to because it was also my favorite one. So Incarnate Avatar. So this is like an example of what the Incarnate Avatar soul meld looks like, right? So you can kind of see like there's the character, but then they have like this sort of translucent force like that's sort of shaped into something around them, and that's a really good representation of what it looks like. But this is a great one to sort of try to explain how the various mechanics work, because this is for the Incarnate class only. It is the soul chakra, and it has basically different effects depending on your alignment. It has different effects based on how many points of Essentia you put into the soul meld, and then when you bind it, it gives you something else. So we're going to look at the sort of the base form here. Now, one of the things about this one is that it really doesn't do anything for you unless you actually invest points into it. So the base version, without spending any of your own personal Essentia into the Incarnate Avatar soul meld, it just changes your appearance. So for example, like this is what it would look like, but it doesn't grant you anything else until you spend points on it. There are other abilities, other soul melds where they give you a base ability, and then if you put points into it, it can increase them or give you other abilities as well. And then if you bind it to the body slot, it unlocks something else. So let's just go ahead and sort of read through here what we've got. So it says, Incarnates channel soul energy that conforms to the ideals of their alignment. So in some ways, this soul meld exemplifies the nature of the Incarnate class. The Incarnum used to shape the Incarnate avatar comes from the outer plane embodiments of the Incarnate's alignment and takes their form. In shaping this meld, Incarnates hope to transcend their own mortal frames and attain the perfect embodiment of their alignment ideals as represented by the avatar. The appearance of your Incarnate avatar depends on your alignment. So if you had a chaotic alignment, your avatar resembles a blue slad. The slad form is hulking and brutish with enormous claws and a toothy maw. Evil, the Incarnate avatar has the form of a Nyakloth, a four-armed gargoyle-like humanoid with green skin and non-functional bat-like wings. If you're good, the Incarnate avatar takes the form of an astral deva with pearl white skin and non-functional white feathered wings, which is actually what we have here. That's sort of what that one looks like. Then we have the lawful one. So your Incarnate resembles a Marat, a powerful humanoid form with golden armor over an onyx body. Unlike other soul melds, the Incarnate avatar provides no benefit without the investment of Essentia. Incarnate avatar is treated as a chaotic, evil, good, or lawful effect based on your alignment. So, Essentia. Investing Essentia into your Incarnate avatar gives you a specific benefit depending on your alignment. Now again, we go back to the chart where you can only spend so many points into this meld based off of your level. So let's just find that again, just really, really quick, just for reference sake. So here we have it again, 1st through 5th, you can only put 1 point in, 6th through 11th, 2 points, 12th through 17th, 3 points, and 18th through 20th, 4 points. So 4 points is essentially the maximum unless you have like a feat or something that lets you channel more into it. If you are chaotic, if you gain a +1 insight bonus on ranged attack rolls for every point of Essentia you invest into the soul meld. If you're evil, you gain a +2 insight bonus on melee damage rolls for every point of Essentia you invest. If you're good, you gain a +1 insight bonus to your armor class for every point that you invest. And if you're lawful, you gain a +1 bonus on melee attack rolls for every point of Essentia you invest into the soul meld. Now, I made an evil NPC, a 20th level like evil NPC Incarnate, and I invested the maximum number of points, so I had 4 points into this meld, so he gained a +8 bonus on melee damage rolls. It's only melee damage, so ranged attacks or spells or other effects won't be modified by it. But I will say I think this one is a little bit weighted towards the evil one, but it's still really cool. Now, the other thing, again, is that's just the basic soul meld. So that's the version that can occupy the same slot as a magic item without interfering with it. But you can also bind it to your soul chakra if you have the ability to do so based on your level. So if you do that, you gain different effects based on your alignment. And essentially, when you also do it, if you bind it, because like the binds actually create like a physical, tangible thing as opposed to the more spectral version of the soul meld, the basic soul meld, you essentially transform into that, like fully into that form as far as your appearance goes. So if you were evil, you would look like this four-armed gargoyle. Right, basically that's kind of the way that works. So if you bind it to the soul chakra, you gain the following abilities based on your alignment. So chaotic characters, they gain an enhancement bonus of 30 feet to their base land speed. So if they had 30 feet normally, they can move 60 feet and around now. If you were evil, you gain a fly speed of 30 feet with good maneuverability because they had like the non-functional wings. Good aligned can also fly because they also have the non-functional wings that become functional once you manifest or bind the soul meld to your soul chakra. And then if you were lawful, you gain immunity to daze, paralysis, petrification, and stun, as well as to any magical effect that would slow you. So they all have sort of like different abilities, different things that they would do. Another one that I really liked back in the day was I think it's Mantle of Fire, or Mantle of Flame, here it is. So this is one, it takes the shoulder slot, again it's an incarnate ability, and it sort of just wreaths you in this sort of like spectral flame. And for each point of Essentia that you invest into the soul meld, anyone that hits you with a natural or weapon attack, they'll take 1d6 points of fire damage for hitting you. Yeah, I just want to make sure it was fire damage. So basically, it's sort of the ability to kind of like rebuke some of their attacks. Like if they hit you, they still do damage to you, but they're going to take some back. If you bind it to your shoulders, however, as a standard action, so standard actions would replace your attacks, but as a standard action, you can expand the mantle to every square adjacent to you, and anyone that's in that has to make a reflex saving throw or take 1d6 damage per point of Essentia that you've invested into it. So that was kind of one that I liked as well. I thought that was a pretty cool one. And there's all kinds of, like I said, really cool abilities that you can do here. I'm not going to go through all of them. Those were the two ones that I remembered the most that I really enjoyed. If I can ever find my 20th level Incarnate, I'll have to show it in a video because he was pretty cool. There's also like the Sphinx Claws, which gives you like the Wolverine claws, which is kind of, again, kind of neat. Yeah, there's just, like I said, all kinds of cool stuff here. Then there's also some spells, and the spells are available to characters of, any of the spellcasting classes. So they have Assassin spells, Bard, Cleric, Blackguard, Druid, Hexblade, Paladin, Ranger, and Wizard and Sorcerer. And essentially what some of these spells can do is they can either affect soul melds that other creatures have. Like there's one that you can target their soul melds, and if they fail their saving throw, all the points of Essentia they've invested into their melds disappears. The melds themselves are still there, but the points that they put into them are considered gone. There's also spells that you can do that for each point of Essentia that you invest into the spell, it increases the effect of the spell. So let's just take a look at the Guardian Spirit here. Essentially what this is it's a spell, you cast it on somebody, it has a duration of 1 hour per level, or until it's discharged. And essentially the way that it works is it's considered a immediate action that you can use. Immediate is kind of like an instant or interrupt, like in card game terms. So if you are hit by something, somebody goes to attack you, for example, you can use that as something that will take effect before they make their attack roll. And essentially what it does is it takes this like a soul energy from specifically like an unborn soul, and it uses that as a way of heightening your senses. So it gives you a +2 insight bonus to armor checks, armor class, reflex saving throws, dexterity checks, and dexterity-based skill checks. Once you activate it, it lasts for 1 minute and then it's gone. So even if you had time left in the duration of 1 hour per level, once you activate it, you have 1 minute and then it's spent. But for every point of Essentia you invest into it, again, limited by your class level, but for every point of Essentia that you invest into the spell, it increases that bonus by another +1. So if you put 2 points of Essentia into your Guardian Spirit spell when you cast it on somebody, and they activate it, would give them a +4 bonus instead of a +2. And like I said, there's just all kinds of different spells that have various effects. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all of them here in this video, but I just wanted to show that there were actual like spells that you can use for incarnate focused characters. But if you have a pool of Essentia points, then you can actually put those into the spells to increase them. Yeah, sort of the same thing with Sonic powers as well. And then we've got some magic items. So you can actually bind as sort of like this optional rule, I guess, or if you're using Magic of Incarnum, you can actually bind pre-existing magic items to the body slot for extra effects. So let's just say, for example, if you were to bind a two-handed melee weapon to your hand slot, you would gain a +2 insight bonus on rolls made to confirm critical threats with the weapon. So they're not major abilities, but it's something that allows you to get something else out of some of these pre-existing abilities, like braces of armor, cloak of displacement, staffs or wands, headbands of intellect, like different weapons, different armor. It's just kind of, again, an interesting way of being able to alter the benefits of pre-existing magic items based on your class. So again, it's just, like I said, kind of a cool idea, kind of a cool concept. And then we got prestige classes. I've never really been big on prestige classes, but there is one in here that I really do like. And that is, dramatic pause, the Necrocarnate. So the Incarnum itself, like I said, is sort of this like latent soul energy that just exists in the universe, and you can freely shape it without it like adversely affecting anyone. It's not like you're necessarily pulling from a person specifically. It's just this is energy that's out there and you can take advantage of it. Necrocarnates, on the other hand, are a little bit more fiendish when it comes to how they utilize Incarnum. So they actually have an ability called Harvest Soul, where they can take the soul energy, they can drain a soul of a recently killed creature in order to gain points of Essentia that they can use for their soul melds. It was actually something that I used for the NPC that I made. Basically, he was actually, I think it was actually epic level, because he was meant to be like a major campaign villain in a campaign that was already epic level. But essentially, the concept was he would use the soul energy of the enemies that he's killed to create these soul melds and to bind them to his body. So he would, out of spite for someone who's wronged them, because he was this like evil warlord, he would execute them and then steal their soul and use their soul, preventing it from gaining like, peaceful eternal rest. He would actually bind their souls into the melds that he would create for himself. And I just thought that was such a cool and super evil concept that I absolutely loved. And there's a few different like Necrocarnum like spells or abilities that they present in this book as well. Again, it's just really, really cool stuff. And then you've got a few like prestige classes, organizations, creatures in here as well. And then information on incorporating into campaigns. This is where you get like some of the organizations for good or for evil that are in there. And then you got your character sheet with your soul melds, and there's actually also a chart here that gives you the different body slots and whether you've got like a soul meld or a chakra bind or a magic item occupying that slot. You can use that to sort of keep track of everything. You've got your Essentia tracker, so you can put down how much, like what the soul meld is, what it does, if it's bound, and how many points that you've spent into it. Again, just really kind of just cool stuff overall. So that's basically it. So that's the magic of Incarnum. It's like I said, it's once you get it, it's a really cool system. Like it took me a little bit to kind of wrap my head around it. But once I did, I really loved it. And I instantly had the idea for this like evil warlord type of individual who would basically like harness his enemies, his fallen enemies, to protect himself or to empower himself. And it just seemed like such a really just an evil thing to do. And I remember like I actually, the day this book came out, was D&D books were coming in on Fridays back then. I think they're coming out like on Tuesdays now, but back in the day it was Fridays when they would come out. And I remember I actually worked a night shift the very night that this came out. So I went to my local game store, picked the book up, went home, fell asleep for a few hours, and then went into work. And it was a really slow night, so I got to sit down and just read through this book, and I started to get really, really hooked. And that's when I made like a 5th level character, just like a player character. And then I was like, you know what? I want to see just how like insane I can get with this. And so I made this like evil incarnate, like necrocarnate character, and I just absolutely loved it. So yeah, it's just like I said, it's a really interesting system. The ability to create essentially your own magic items and power them up, or to use your own like latent abilities to enhance certain spells or like magic items, just stuff like that. It was just a really, really cool concept. Unfortunately, Incarnum never really took off. Like I said, a lot of people that I know that were into 3rd edition really didn't know what this book was about unless they were like in my gaming group. where I kind of gushed over it. But that's not to say that there were certain concepts or raw concepts that this book introduced that weren't kind of utilized later on down the road. You could almost say like the legacy of the Magic of Incarnum book would be things like in 4th edition, you had this magical resource called Residium, which magic items could be broken down for to like use to enchant other items. It's not quite the same thing, but it takes the concept of creating a resource that you can use to create magic items. In 5th edition D&D and some other systems, you also kind of have the idea of having to attune to certain weapons or items, meaning that they either won't really function unless you form a bond with it, as if you put some of your own personal energies into the item so that it becomes part of you essentially and gives you like the access to the abilities, or like items that have lesser effects. But if you attune to them, unlock greater effects. So that's kind of the legacy of Magic of Incarnum. But I would love to see like the Incarnate class, the Incarnum concept, just really come back full blown. There were certain things that you'd probably have to change for modern D&D. For example, the fixation on alignments is something that would probably need to change because alignment restrictions just aren't a thing in 5th edition. I don't think there's a single class anymore that has any sort of alignment restriction. But there's other things that you could do instead of like it being based on your alignment. You can simply choose which form it would take on, sort of thing. But I just thought it was just a really cool system. Like I loved the book. I loved the look of the book. Like as soon as I saw the cover of it, I really loved it. Like I loved like the idea of this, the book having this vial of this like incarnate fluid or vapor sort of inside of it. Just looked, again, just a really cool looking book, a really interesting concept, and it's kind of a shame that it never really went anywhere. And to be fair, really none of those alternate system books really did take off in any way, shape, or form to be incorporated into like 4th edition or beyond, other than maybe like the Tome of Battle, the Book of Nine Swords, where the fighters had stances that kind of influenced the design of martial characters in 4th edition. But it was, like I said, it was an interesting time because Wizards of the Coast, they were being creative. They were really throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. And they came up with some really kind of off-the-wall concepts that I really loved. Like I remember with Weapons of Legacy, which I'll do a video on at some point, but I remember like right before the book was announced, I was running a campaign and I had these magic items that would be bound to specific characters, and as the character went up in level, the weapons or the items would gain some extra abilities and powers and stuff like that. And then like I think like a week after I started like writing out what the things would do at different levels. Then like the Weapons of Legacy book came out. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was a really interesting time. Like I said, it was before Wizards of the Coast were fully entrenched in developing 4E. So the stuff that was coming out for 3.5 was innovative. It was interesting. It was unique, but it wasn't like lazy or the results of the well being kind of empty or the creative energies being focused elsewhere. And this was just, like I said, a really interesting book and a really cool concept. I may actually do a more in-depth look at the races, at the classes, and go more in depth into like the abilities and stuff like that. But for today, I just kind of wanted to touch on this subject because I was just looking at my shelf and I keep looking at the spine of this book, and I just remembered how much I loved reading it that night shift the day that I got it. And like 4 o'clock in the morning, making an epic level NPC who would steal enemy souls and use them to protect himself. I just thought it was a really cool concept. So let me know in the comments below. Did any of you, back in your 3.5 days, for those who played 3.5 or were part of it back in the day, did any of you actually use this book? Did anyone actually create an Incarnate, or did their DMs use Incarnum and soul melds, or for villains or enemies or anything like that? Or did you buy the book and just like maybe look through it once and put it on the shelf, or did you just buy it and throw it on the shelf like I did with Dragon Magic and have no idea what's in it? But yeah, just let me know in the comments below. This was a really cool book. I really like it. I think it's a really cool, interesting concept, and I would love to see it come back. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.